Hello, I don't know if anyone's watching, but I'm carrying a story, and it often feels like it's a story hardly anyone knows or understands. It's a story of the Hutchinsons and the Marburys and the Wentworths and the division that started at the inception of our country. It's an American origin story. And one of my instructions has been to know who you're from, know your own story. So that's led me to say these words: I take my whiteness upon myself as a condition of my own liberation, to really understand deep in my body who my people are, what the lineage is. Of course, it's extremely complex. So many directions, so many ancestors. But mine particularly come remarkably out of the time of the advent of the Puritans in the early 1600s. These are the folks that rose through trial and through imprisonment for their own sense of integrity of what they believed in England. And Alfred is where my people come from, Alfred, England. And you know, that whole sort of eastern side of England. And there was a lot going on politically there. And these folks, for threat of imprisonment, did come to Massachusetts. So let me just take a pause there, because I want to honor and respect both the Massachusetts people. The word Massachusetts means a ceremonial ground of that tribal community. And I also want to honor the Pequot people who were killed by the people that my families were affiliated with, by John Winthrop and the new governance of Boston. Just complete, full-out genocide, and the beginning of what many people think was the beginning of the real war between Indians and people who were colonizers. So I'm honoring that. And I also honor the people where I am, the Nisenan people, who are still on unceded land, barely recognized, but at least have some land for community and for remembering and reconnecting to their lineage. My lineage is also part of the divisive story of this time we're in. And I call myself into this rant because a rant is an interplay form where you just get to say with some feeling, some intensity about the disturbing nature of something. And I'm so disturbed, and I have been disturbed for a long time. And maybe this will give you a little bit of a hint why. Because I discovered when my beloved stepfather uncovered the lineage of my mother through the Wentworth lines, that the Wentworths William Wentworth was just brought in right as an 18-year-old, right into the center of this transition across the ocean and into Boston, alongside of his family members and the people that he followed, which include Anne Hutchinson and her family. She was married to William, and she had numerous children, over a dozen. And she was a very smart woman. She was trained by her father, who was under house arrest, had nothing else to do, but really valued education for his female children, and taught her and trained her and helped her to think. And so when she came across, she was not in any way sitting just in a female sort of back of the body way. She was right to the front. She was a teacher. She was also a midwife. She's also a woman who had lost a child during the plague in Alfred. So she understood these kind of devastating effects of time, place, history. She was also part of a movement called the Familists, which was these were both she and her husband William really sensed that men and women could be collaborators and co-create together. And of course, all of these ways of thinking were absolutely, alternative in England. And of course, they almost immediately became alternative in Boston. Because what happened was that as she was allowed to be part of the community, even though she had been well revered, she was given place to hold these gatherings where men and women gathered. And a young nobleman, Sir Henry Vale, was brought over from England, so supposedly to kind of help organize and be part of this process. But he almost immediately became one of her followers. And that was, in the end, a sign, though the other clergy and the other people, these other Puritan men, they were completely anxious that such a voice as Anne Hutchinson's would be followed, because what she believed in was that each person had the dignity and authority of their own experiential connection to grace. I'm sure there's things that she believed in that I would disagree with now, but this thing, that each body is inherently connected, inherently dignified. So they started coming at her. They started coming at all of the people that followed her. And her brother-in-law, Wheelwright, who preached a sermon in this early church, he was also from this point of view. Well, he was almost immediately told to leave Boston and to move on out. And all of his followers, they were forced to sign these agreements that said they did not believe in what the Wheelwrights and the Hutchinsons were going on about. And, mind you, these were the merchants. These were people with some wealth. These were people that were really trying to find a way to have a voice and have a way of life, in addition to impacting the land and the peoples around them. But you can understand that these are people that were valuing their neighbors. They were not just coming to take land. They were looking for relationship and neighbors. And so, as Anne and the merchants, some of them now leaving and taking their resources with them to Rhode Island and New Hampshire, this putting John Winthrop, the then newly elected governor, right in the mix of the center of everything. This man was a legalist. He was a lawyer. And the clergy around him were right with him. These were men's men. These were men who had a sense of how this was all going to work out. They had it all organized. And one of the things that they decided to do, and I still do not understand why, is that they decided to take up arms against the Pequot people. And Anne and the Hutchinsons basically refused. They said, no, we are not doing that. They had their guns, their hunting rifles, taken. And the the Winthrops and the men that did go basically slaughtered those Pequot people. That's the moment where this inflammation really combusts. Anne, the Hutchinsons, the Wheelwrights, the Wentworths, all of these people then are under attack. They had to leave, or they had to get with the program if they were to get their guns back and their sense of place in this quote-unquote new world. Anne, of course, refused, and many others did too. My grandfather, William Wentworth, followed the track with Wheelwright to New Hampshire. And before Anne and her husband William and their children were to be moved, she had to withstand a trial for her part in all of this. She was put under house arrest, and she withstood the trial. She was eloquent. She spoke powerfully. But then, towards the end of the trial, and this is all written down, one of the first written pieces, she realized that she was not going to get out of this with any sense of integrity, not to mention any gain. So her husband started on his way to Rhode Island to check things out, where there was some sense of the separation of church and state, and it wasn't quite so enmeshed. And Anne stood up to these men. She recognized what was going on. She stood up and she said, basically, you will not have any ownership of me or my body or my thoughts. And she put a curse on them. This will be a curse upon you. Whew. And you'd think that would be enough, but no, they decided from that point on, even her mentor, John Cotton, they'd all wanted to get around her and excommunicate her as well. So she was held under house arrest still through the winter. And we're right in the week before that excommunication from what we would come to know as the Congregational Church now, these early Puritans. This is a lineage that I've been a part of, the Congregational Church, which one would think would be a long distance away, except for I've never heard this story in church ever. And I think that's heinous. It's terrible. This is part of how we know who we are and what has happened and what we're up against. So Anne was also pregnant during this time and had a miscarriage. She was demonized for having a miscarriage of a malformed fetus. Demonized. It was part of these witch hunts against any woman or being that has a sense of connection and grace within themselves. If you're a person and you're listening to this and you do have that sense of connection, of grace, of being beloved inside of yourself, of having a sense of an authority and a connection to earth and heaven and the divine within yourself, that is not granted to you by some institution, but by the divine intelligence itself. You can imagine how disturbing it is to be told that you're not to have that and you're to behave in a certain way, just to even have that wisdom. Why is that so threatening? Well, it's threatening because when people have a picture and they want things to be in a certain model or mode, to be, as John Winthrop called it, a light upon the hill that would behave in a certain kind of way, a very controlled way. That's what you get. So we are in a time where the division, where the war against women and the Indian people, where the war against people with a sovereign sense of connection, an open sense to the beloved, more than tolerance, but a felt sense of interrelationship, of the interplay of all things, of the dancing center of all beingness, where this went under attack and went under the bus. This has been here from the origin of the United States of America and our identity. So I'm thinking in this time that I'm in right now, in this world of authoritarian, oppressive, violent, male agenda that is against any kind of diverse conversation or complexity of creation. This, to me, goes back to the beginnings of Boston. It goes back to England. and the United Kingdom, and it goes way, way back all the way. It keeps going back. And there is a time and there is a place inside of us that knows something different. I've lived it, I know it, and it is beloved. So I'm stopping right here. This is my rant. It feels good to say it, and I'm going to probably be saying it again and again, because I think unless we understand and know our story, and particularly white people, unless we get centered and clear about who we've come from and what we've been part of, how can we be liberated? We cannot. We are not the saviors of anyone. We are the ones who need the liberation. So I end this again by saying I take my whiteness upon myself as a condition of my own liberation. And in that way, I don't have to back down. I don't have to go sideways. I don't have to even apologize. I just need to stand in reality. And that is where hope comes from. So may it be so. And many blessings to all of my friends and loved ones.